and welcome to a GoEngineer presentation on SOLIDWORKS PDM. In today's video, we'll be looking at the process of upgrading and converting a PDM Standard Vault and turning that into a PDM Professional Vault. First, a few prerequisites, assumptions, and additional resources to talk about here. The first additional resource is that I'd like to have you review the official SOLIDWORKS installation guide. You can find that in the Program Files directory of any PDM client machine. It's in Program Files, SOLIDWORKS PDM, Lang, GB. You're looking for a PDF called Installation Guide. This guide will cover backup procedures, installing SQL Server Standard Edition, and upgrading Standard to Professional. So all of the things that we'll be covering in today's presentation are going to be covered at length in that PDF. So that's the official guide from SOLIDWORKS on how to do all of these things. The next thing I'd like you to think about is backing up your system. So please take a full system backup before proceeding with the instructions in this video. There are certain steps that we're going to cover that past that point, the only way to restore your system back to a functional PDM standard environment would be to restore your database from backup. And if we don't have a backup of your complete system now, it won't be possible after a certain point in time. This presentation will assume that PDM is being upgraded in place. So that is to say, we're taking a PDM Standard Vault on a server and we're upgrading that to PDM Professional on the same server, as opposed to spinning up an entirely separate server for your PDM Professional Vault. That's possible, it's just not a use case that we're covering in this video presentation. Plan for downtime or after business hours operations, because during the Vault upgrade process, there should be no Vault access permitted. In other words, we don't want users in the Vault actively changing things while we're running this upgrade. The last item is that if you're hesitant to do it yourself, please request a quote from the GoEngineer Professional Services team. You can reach us at pdmservices@goengineer.com, and we'll be happy to provide you a detailed services quote to help you upgrade your system. All right, now let's get into the key steps. So upgrading a PDM Standard Vault to Professional, there are certain operations that need to be conducted server-side, and then also certain operations that need to be conducted client-side. On the server, we're going to install a new instance of SQL Server Standard Edition. So PDM Standard is using SQL Server Express, whereas PDM Professional will require the SQL Server Standard Edition. The next step is to activate your new professional serial number on the FlexNet Licensing Manager. So we're going to make sure our licenses are available and activated prior to proceeding with the upgrade process. The third step is the key one. This is the step that actually upgrades or transforms your PDM Standard database into a PDM Professional database. And this is done from the PDM Administration tool. The fourth step is to modify the PDM server installation from Standard to Professional. This is the process of taking the server applications and upgrading them from the Standard version to the Professional version. So this is a software upgrade. The fifth step is to transfer databases. So what we'll be doing is we'll be taking backups of the databases in the SQL Server Express instance and then transferring them to the Standard Edition instance of SQL. So this is a backup and restore process from within the SQL Server environment. And then lastly, there are a few registry updates that need to take place on the server. So we'll be looking at those in detail too. Now, of these server-side operations, I'll be covering all of these steps in this presentation except the first one. I'm going to assume that you've already installed your new instance of SQL Server Standard Edition. And if you have any questions on how to install that product, that's again covered in that installation guide.pdf that I referenced on the previous slide. So please get that installed up front before starting these instructions. The SQL Express instance for PDM Standard is typically installed with a named instance. So it would be fine to install then PDM Standard Edition as the default instance or as yet again another named instance. If your SQL Express version is installed as the default instance, however, then you'll want to make sure that you're installing the Standard Edition as a named instance. This refers to the name of the SQL instance that you'll give it during the installation process. It's either going to be default or some specially named instance. Now on the client side, there are a few operations that we need to do for each client. So on each PDM client machine, we need to modify those client installations and change the application install from Standard to Professional. And then similar to the server, there are a few registry updates on each client that need to be adjusted to point to the new SQL Server name. All right, well, let's get right into it here. We're going to proceed on step 2 of the server-side instructions, where we're going to activate the new professional serial number on the licensing manager. The first thing you'll want to do is locate your license manager server. Now, if you don't know what machine is acting as your license manager, you can open up the administrative tool on any PDM client. And in the administrative tool, you can look under license in the Vault admin tool, and that will tell you what your licensing server is. So in this case, I can tell my license server is GoServe1. So I want to make sure I'm on that server. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do is obtain your PDM Professional serial number. If you're not sure what your PDM Professional serial number is, please contact your account manager at GoEngineer or contact one of our support engineers through our technical support department, and they'll be able to get you that serial number. Once I have that serial number, I'll want to turn to the registry editor, and I'll want to locate this key. So under H key local machine, I'll highlight that path here. You'll want to locate this string value for the solid network license serial numbers. And within here, you'll see a series of serial numbers. These are going to be your PDM standard serial numbers, as well as any SOLIDWORKS numbers and the like that this license manager is managing. To the end of this list, you're going to want to add a comma and then copy paste your PDM Professional serial number. And then we can close the registry editor. The next step is then to reopen our Solid Network License Manager. You can type in Solid into your Windows search for Solid Network License Manager. Open that application. This is where we can see on license usage what licenses we currently have available for us. And you can see here are my PDM standard license counts. Now that I have a new serial number, I'll want to go to the first page, Server Administration, and modify. This will ask me what I would like to do. So I would like to activate or reactivate product licenses, and this is going to be based on the serial numbers that it finds in the registry. On this next page, keep the defaults, your computer name, and the two port numbers, 25734 and 25735. It's always a good idea to have the checkbox that a firewall is in use on the server, regardless of whether your server actually has a firewall in place. It's good practice. Select Next. On this page, you'll see all of the various serial numbers that are activated on this machine. Select Next, and it'll just take a few moments for it to activate your new professional serial number. At the end, it'll give you a list of all your active licenses on this server. Select Finish. And then the last step is to just re-verify on your license usage tab that you now have activated licenses for the PDM Professional product. So here I have 5 editor seats, for example, available. Okay, so now we're certain that we have PDM Professional licenses available on our FlexNet License Manager, and our Vault is already pointed to this FlexNet License Manager. So in terms of licensing, that's all we need to do. Let's double back on our PowerPoint here. We've just completed step 2, activating a new professional serial number on our license manager. The next step that we want to complete is to upgrade the database to professional. And this is done through the PDM administration tool. Now, if your server has a client installed on it, you can do this all on the server. If your server doesn't have a client installed on it, you'll need to go to one of your standard client machines. We'll want to go to the Start menu and open up the PDM administration console and log into the Vault. Now, the admin console is part of the client install, so your server would have to have a client on it to have this administrative console. This is probably the easiest of all of the steps we'll complete today. We simply need to right-click on the Vault and select this option here that says Upgrade to Professional. This is going to run some kind of a script that will reach into the SQL database and upgrade some locked parameters in that database from standard to professional. Little wizard that it'll walk us through here. I'll select Next. I'll make sure I've read all of the causes and caveats and ands, ifs, and buts, and select Next. It'll verify what my license server is, which should be the same. In this case, we're not switching license servers. And I'll select Finish and Close. And that's it. Now, the reason that that vault disappears for you is that this administrative tool is a PDM standard administrative tool, and it's not going to be able to show you any professional vaults. But that vault will show up again, trust me, once we upgrade the applications to professional. So go ahead and close your administrative tool, and let's jump back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so that was step 3, super easy to upgrade the database to professional. The next step is to modify the PDM server installation from standard to professional. Now, basically all we're doing is going into programs and features. We're going to do a modify on the current installation, and we're just going to select the other radio button that says PDM Professional. These are going to be the same installation dialogues that you would see installing PDM Pro in the first place. So if you have any questions, please refer back to that PDM installation guide.pdf that I referred to on the first slide. Let's jump back to our server. Go to the Start menu, go to Programs and Features, and I want to locate my PDM server install. So here's that PDM server install, and I'll simply change. It's going to bring up the installation manager. I'll select Next. We're going to modify the installation as opposed to repairing or removing it. Never remove a PDM installation. That would corrupt your Vault installations. Okay, here is the relevant page. Our current application installs are PDM standard. I simply need to switch them to PDM Professional. All right, the rest of these pages are standard installation pages, right? So what applications do you have installed? I have the archive server, database server, and a client installed on this server. I'm going to select Next. This is the licensing type for the client install. So this page is asking you for what type of license the client on the server is going to use. PDM Cat Editor is fine. This page is asking you for what add-ins the client would manage, and since this is a server client, I don't need any of these add-ins. If this were a standard client on a workstation, you'd be looking at which add-ins that client would be using. On this next page, what we're doing is we're pointing the software to the new SQL Server host. So we're switching from SQL Server Express to SQL Server Standard Edition. So what you're going to write here is the default server name. If you've installed the default instance of SQL Server Standard Edition, or the server name / the instance name if you've installed Standard Edition under an instance name. In this case, I've installed SQL Server Standard Edition as the default instance, so it would just be the server name. And then I'll want to include the SA or System Administrator user password. This doesn't necessarily have to be the SA user, but a SQL user with DB owner access to the SOLIDWORKS PDM databases. It's the user account that the PDM services will use to write to the SQL database. And then we'll select Next, and then Install. That's all there is to it. I'm going to select Finish, and it'll warn me that I need to probably restart. I'll say no to restart later, but at some point you'll want to fully restart your server at the end of this process. Okay, so let's take a look back at our PowerPoint. So now we've completed the fourth step, which is to modify the PDM server installation from standard to professional. So we've done that now. So the application install base is now at the professional level. The SQL databases are now at the professional level. And now our next step is to transfer the databases from the Express edition to the Standard edition. And we're going to do this from within the SQL Server Management Studio. Let's go back to our server. I'm going to open up the SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to log into both the Express instance as well as my Standard edition instance. In both cases, I'll log in as the System Administrator user. So here I've saved my credentials from a previous login, but I'm logging into the Express instance. And then I'll also want to connect the database engine services to the new Standard Edition instance, which is the default instance. Okay, so now I have the Management Studio tied into both my SQL Server Express instance and the new Standard Edition instance. Under the Standard Edition, I currently don't have any PDM Vault databases, just the standard system databases. Under the original Express instance, I have two Vault databases. I have the Kinesio Master DB, and then I'll have the PDM Standard Vault. I'll want backup copies of both of these databases. So I'll prepare the backups in exactly the same way. So I'll show you that on one of these databases and then just simply repeat for the other database. So for each of these databases, I'm going to right click and I'll select Tasks, Backup. This will give me this database backup dialog. The first thing I'll want to do is remove any default backup paths that are there, and I'll want to add my own so I know where these backups are. I'll browse out, and I'll want to select a known location where I can save these backups on a temporary basis. So I've created a folder in the root of my C drive named temp. This is the Kinesio Master DB, and then I'll add the file extension .bak. Okay, so that's the path where I want to back up this database. I'm on the general page currently, and I want to make sure my backup type is set to full as opposed to differential. And then I'll want to look at media options. On media options, I want to make sure I'm overwriting, and then I'm setting to verify backup when finished under reliability. And then we can select OK. All right, now I will have backed up that Kinesio Master DB in my temp directory. So let's go look and make sure we can verify that that's here. There's my database backup from SQL Server Express. And then I'll want to do that same operation for the Vault database. And once you've backed up both databases, double check the Windows location where you've backed up those databases and just verify that you have both of those. So I have a separate backup for my PDM Vault database and then the Kinesio Master as well. All right. Now we've taken those backups from the SQL Server Express edition. Now we're just going to restore them to the Standard edition. In the Object Explorer, go to the Standard Edition instance, right-click on the Databases folder in the tree, and select Restore Database. You'll get the Restore Database dialog that pops up. You'll want to select Device as opposed to From Database. And then over to the right, we're going to hit the Browse button to browse out and add the path of the directory wherever you saved the database backups. So in my case, it was C temp. Select that folder, and then I'll select one of my two back files. I'll do the Kinesio Master DB first. Select OK. OK again to set that path. And just make sure down here under Restore, the box is checked. So we're indeed going to restore that. Go to Files and select Relocate All Files to Folder, and this should give you the default data store for your Standard Edition instance. This is the default data path as described during the SQL installation. And then I'll select OK. And then we should get the notification that the database was restored successfully. And then we'll repeat that operation for the Vault database as well. So restore database, from device, browse, add. This time I'll select the Vault database. OK. OK. And then we'll go to Files, relocate that to the default data store, select OK. And then we've restored both of those databases. So I have now the Kinesio Master and the PDM Vault database in the SQL Server Standard Edition. All right, now that's all we need to do on the SQL Server side in terms of manipulating the databases directly. Let's take a look at the PowerPoint again to take a look at next steps. The last step that we need to then make on the server to be complete with our server-side instruction set is to simply update the registry entries accordingly. And this is for the SQL Server referenced by the database server service. Let's go take a look at that. We'll go to our server. open up the registry editor, and here we'll want to look for the mail service key in this path I'll highlight here. You want to look for the string value for the server name, and this is the name of the SQL server. This is going to currently have the instance name that you installed for the Express edition, and you'll want to swap this out with the name of the SQL Server Standard Edition. I installed the default instance for SQL Server, so it would just simply be my server name. If you installed Standard Edition under an instance name, you'll put / instance name, just as you had for Express, and that's it. The last step on the server installation is to simply restart your server and we're going to validate that once we get logged back into the server that we can log in under the PDM Professional software. All right, now once you've rebooted your server, the proof is always in the pudding. So let's open up the administrative console on the server. And you should see once again that your PDM Vault shows up, but instead of being a gray database icon, it should be a gold database icon. And this really is your key indicator that you've been successful. This is a PDM Professional environment. If I hit the little plus sign or right click and select Connect, I want to log into the administration console and verify that I now have access to the expanded feature set of configurable options that PDM Professional provides. Right, so this admin tree just got a lot bigger. We've now completed all of the steps server side to upgrade your PDM standard environment to a professional environment. Let's go back and take a look at the PowerPoint. We're now moving on to the client side settings. All right, so we have two things to do client side. One is to modify the client installation from standard to pro. And then the second thing is to update a couple of registry keys on each client in a similar way to what we did with the server. Now here we're going to want to turn to Programs and Features. Now in all likelihood, your PDM Standard Edition client is likely installed with your SOLIDWORKS installation, but it could be installed separately. So once you look in Programs and Features on the PDM client machine, you'll either see just SOLIDWORKS or you'll see SOLIDWORKS and a PDM client. If there's no PDM client separately installed, then it means it's installed and registered to the SOLIDWORKS installation. So what we'll do is we'll just hit Change on SOLIDWORKS, go into the SOLIDWORKS Installation Manager, and toggle that same radio button that we saw earlier to change the client installation from standard to professional, and then finish out the modification on that install. If the standard client is installed separately, so you see it separately in the admin tool, then you'll want to change that installation. And it'll just be a matter of context. So you'll get different installation managers, but you'll want to find the setting to convert the PDM client from standard to professional, and then finish out the install modification. So that's fairly straightforward on the client installation side. The only thing you need to determine is how the PDM client's installed, directly with SOLIDWORKS or on its own. In most cases with standard, it's likely installed along with the SOLIDWORKS installation. Now to the registry. So we have to update certain registry keys on each client machine. Let's take a look at those. Okay, so for each client machine, there'll be two keys that we need to update. Let's open the registry editor again. We're going to start in HKey local machine, software, SOLIDWORKS, applications, PDMWorks Enterprise, and then expand out the databases key. And then you'll find a key associated with your vault name. So in this case, PDM Vault is my vault name. Under your vault, there'll be a string value for DB server. Let's edit that string. And here again, we're replacing the SQL Server name, the SQL Server Express instance name with your SQL Server Standard Edition server name. And we need to make that same edit If we roll back up to, if we roll up the SOLIDWORKS key, scroll down to the WOW 6432 node, in the same relative path, so that's SOLIDWORKS, Applications, PDMWorks Enterprise, Databases, and then Vault. This key will also have the DB server string value that will update to the standard edition SQL name. Now let's take a look back at the PowerPoint. So once again, on the client side, we've modified the software installations to upgrade from standard to professional. And then as a last step, we've updated some registry keys to change the DB server string values to update against the new SQL Server Standard Edition name. These two steps will need to be repeated on every client installation. And at the end, you'll have a successful upgrade. With all the server and client-side steps completed, that concludes the upgrade from standard to professional. And on behalf of the entire GoEngineer team, I'd like to thank you for watching this presentation. Enjoy PDM Pro.